Hello and welcome to an Inspector Calls Finish in 5. Now, this is the 6th in a series of little videos all about key extracts from the text. Now, the idea is by looking at these 5 or so different extracts for every text, or 6 on this one, you get like a full overview of the play. Now, every video includes a little preamble about what's happened before the actual extract, a reading of the extract, a quick summary about why it's important, and a little summary as well also about the aftermath of it and what happens next. So in terms of what's happened so far, in the play so far, all the Burling family and Gerald have faced the inspector's questions. Every character has had to recount what happened with Eva, what they did, and also face the judgment of the others. Sheila and Eric have learned from the experience. Gerald was deeply upset by what happened, and Burling and Mrs. Burling were shocked by the revelations of what's happened, particularly the bit involving Eric. Now, with those questions answered, the inspector is ready to depart. So the inspector, before he goes, gives a speech, and that speech we're looking at in today's extract. In it, he summarises what we've seen on stage in terms of what each character has done. He links back through the events to show how it all builds up, and he judges them for their actions. However, the inspector also, here, summarises the symbolism of Eva Smith, and also Priestley's central message about collective social responsibility and the dangers if people don't solve the problems in society. Stop! And be quiet for a moment and listen to me. I don't need to know any more, and neither do you. This girl killed herself. She died a horrible death. But each of you helped to kill her. Remember that. Never forget it. But then I don't think you ever will. Remember what you did, Mrs. Burling. You turned her away when she most needed help. You refused her even the pitiable little bit of organised charity you had in your power to grant her. Remember what you did. My God, I'm not likely to forget. Just used her for the end of a stupid drunken evening, as if she were an animal, a thing, not a person. No, you won't forget. I know. I had her turned out of a job. I started it. You helped, but you didn't start it. You started it. She wanted 25 shillings a week instead of 22 and sixpence. You made her pay a heavy price for that. And now she'll make you pay a heavier price still. Yeah, look, Inspector, I give thousands, thousands. You're offering the money at the wrong time, Mr. Burling. No, I don't think any of you will forget. Nor that young man Croft, though he at least had some affection for her, made her happy for a while. Well, Eva Smith's gone. You can't do her any more harm. You can't do her any good either. You can't even say I'm sorry, Eva Smith. That's the worst of it. But just remember this. One Eva Smith is gone. But there are millions and millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and their chance of happiness, all intertwined with our lives and what we think and say and do. We don't live alone. We're members of one body. We are responsible for each other. And I tell you, the time will soon come when, if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. Good night. Okay, so in terms of dissecting the extract, we start the speech with the inspector finally and absolutely taking charge. He began the play as someone polite and relatively diffident. Here, he's been completely morally empowered by the play, and that's as evidenced by everyone stopping and listening. Interruptions, remember, are signs of power, and here the power is all with the inspector. Then the inspector begins with a key point about knowledge. Regardless of anything else, the key facts are that a girl died and that all of them are responsible. His point is that by remembering, they become able to change, and he turns the focus then on each of them in turn. The reactions of the characters are important. Eric and Sheila are clear that they understand and they wouldn't forget. Burling tries to offer money. He's clearly learned nothing, and Mrs. Burling stays silent. The inspector, oddly, seems to forgive Gerald the most, since he was at least emotionally involved with Eva on some level, although Gerald's later failure to learn is disappointing. The most important bit, though, is the final section. The inspector makes the point clearly that Eva Smith is a symbolic character, one of millions and millions and millions of women and men like her. The inspector makes clear that every aspect of their lives, emotionally and physically, is intertwined with everyone else's, and what we think and say and do. And all three of those are, remember, important. It wasn't enough for Sheena to say the right things at the start. And Burling is unable to change because regardless of what he does, including giving thousands, yes thousands, he doesn't understand. He isn't thinking the right things. The inspector's line about being members of one body feels almost biblical, and it certainly links to Priestley's wider point. Society works as a whole. It's holistic. It's a network. It's not simply a loose assembly of individuals. And that's why we are responsible for each other. And that's responsible both in terms of duty bound to look after each other, and also responsible as in held accountable for what happens. When the inspector talks about men needing to learn that lesson, he means people. But it does feel like men as a gender are in many ways at the root of the problems in the play. Masculinity is at fault. And there's a clear sense also of people needing to return to being educated, to become more impressionable, to quote that line from the inspector earlier in the play, so that people can learn that lesson. Of course, that famous final line from the inspector, fire and blood and anguish, is crucial. It's the world wars that he's referencing most directly, but it's also the idea of hell and eternal damnation, with a resonance back also in terms of Eva Smith's death, having burnt her inside out and died in agony. In a sense, and in many productions, this is a speech delivered not to the Burlings, but directly to the audience, with the inspector then as Priestley's mouthpiece. And for the last time, what comes next? Well, with the inspector gone, the Burnings and Gerald are left to pick over what has happened. Burling and Mrs. Burling blame their children. Eric and Sheila blame themselves and everyone else. What's clear is that the older generation still see responsibility as individual and something to be avoided. The younger generation realise that responsibility is collective and to be taken. Gerald returns, having realised that the inspector wasn't a real inspector, and the family work out that Eva Smith wasn't necessarily a single person. It could have been different photographs that were shown. And a phone call reveals that no one has actually died. Eric and Sheila understand that this changes nothing. Everything they did has still happened, regardless of whether someone died at the end or whether it was all the same girl. Burling sees it all as a joke, as does Mrs. Burling. Gerald tries even to give Sheila the ring back. He's clearly learned nothing. The play ends with a phone call. An inspector is on his way to investigate the death of a girl. The whole cycle has started again. And the implication is that this cycle will keep occurring until society as a whole and everybody in it has changed. And again, for the last time, don't forget all the resources available to help you revise. There's the recipe book, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. The quotation cards, which are very, very useful. The Net English One YouTube channel with hundreds of videos on there. There's the Twitter feed with that daily quotation. There's the NET text guide on inspector calls, which your teachers can provide, or you can get through the websites. And of course, your Academy websites also give you access to that whole set of English podcasts, which involve a whole load of little clips, all about everything to do with the play. Okay, and that concludes our finish in 5 for inspector calls, which I do realise has stretched to 6, but the idea still applies. Hopefully that's been useful. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, do please speak to your teacher, your head of English, or your director.